Let me tell you the story of the food war. Some 60 years ago, the food war started. In the red corner, we have Ancel Keys from Minnesota, who was very adamant that fat was the big killer. While in the blue corner, from London, we had John Yudkin, who was equally adamant that sugar was the big killer. At first, the ferocity of the battle was intense, but gradually subsided as it was recognised that fats, like omega-3, were actually essential and our brains run on sugar. A consensus grew among the experts, centred around the Mediterranean diet and its offshoot, the flexitarian diet, which recognised that people would sneak down to Greasy Joe's for a hamburger anyway and were unlikely to instantaneously drop dead. They were less keen on admitting that sugars and fats are actually essential. It's just that we eat too much because we are not satisfied because of poor gut health and lack of nutrients. But they had both missed that there was a third group in the yellow corner of the ring, and these guys had made an amazing discovery. People did not like the taste of straight fat, and even though the first teaspoonfuls of sugar were pretty tasty, people soon got turned off and stopped eating. But if they make sugar and fats together, ratio they call the bliss points, people just loved it. True, they had to disguise it a bit so it looked a bit like some sort of food, such as ice cream, cheesecake, pizza, chicken wings and chips. But people just loved it and ate it by the mouthful and were happy to pay good money for it, which was incredibly good news as it was very cheap to produce. Sugar has always been cheap to produce. Just invade some country with a lot of heat and rain, capture a lot of slaves from Africa, and bingo, cheap sugar. Now, of course, that is looked down on, so we can use giant machines, but the result is the same, cheap sugar. Making fats is a bit more involved. There are a lot of plants that make fats. Corn, soya, palm oil are the easy ones. Again, find a place that's hot and wet. Evading is out of date, so offer special benefits to the local government to let you chop down the local forest, and bingo, you have cheap raw materials to make fat. You can also make fat by feeding these plants to animals in feedlots. Okay, it is saturated fats, but it is natural, and people like cheap meat, so no problems there. Much more efficient is to use a giant chemical plant to force hydrogen into the bonds, and you have cheap fat. Unfortunately, some uncooperative governments have banned these trans fats. That is not exactly a health food, but there is ways around that. You now have the world's largest industry, the food industry, with even more money than the smartphone business, a multi-trillion-dollar food industry which can afford to spend billions of dollars on advertising and promotion and facilitation. The poor scientists in their red and blue corners were so busy arguing over whether it was sugar or fats were bad that they hadn't even noticed the team in the yellow corner, and were completely taken by surprise when a whole bunch of diseases which had been kicking around for centuries suddenly became an epidemic. That's diseases that stem from being fat, like diabetes, heart attacks and dementia. These cost governments a lot of money in health costs, so they took notice and started to spend serious money on research to find a solution. No doubt, they were hoping some magic pill would turn up so they could just feed the masses to stop them getting fat and sick. But, attractive as the idea was, no such magic pill eventuated, despite a sea of pretenders. The scientists, lots of them, from all around the world in prestigious universities and research institutes, did a lot of serious research, and there are now oceans of scientific papers on how diet affects health, and a gradual agreement came into being, so there was now the scientists working together in the red and blue corners in combat with the food industry in the yellow corner. This should have been a simple battle between science and money, but the scientists had a handicap, a serious one, and even worse, the goalposts kept on moving, if you can have goalposts in a wrestling ring. But it was really simple. There was lifespan, which was easy to measure, You're alive, then dead. A pretty non-debatable issue. And you could do all sorts of wonderful calculations to measure how lifespan was changing. And until recently, and even more recently until COVID came along, lifespan was increasing. Science and medical technology were simply doing a great job in keeping people alive for longer. But then a new concept came along. In the olden days, a real lot, actually most, of people died young. One day they were fit and healthy, and along came one of the many diseases around then, and in a few weeks they were dead. Pretty simple. But in this new age of food technology, it stopped being simple. People were certainly living longer, but they were becoming unhealthy, but still alive. Much younger, dribbling away in their wheelchairs, wondering why these strange kids kept on calling them granddad. So scientists started talking about a new phenomenon they called health span. And governments took notice as it became inconvenient to have a large population of unhealthy people that took so long to die, with an ever-increasing gap between health span and lifespan. This was important because it cost the system a lot of money. So the scientists and the governments got together to explain to the public about food and health. But they had two big handicaps. The first was that people loved their sugary, fatty food and just did not want to give it up. The second was that people were just different, which means that genuine scientific papers were full of statistics and weird things called p-values that no one outside the business of statistics really understood. If scientists have been able to come out and say, look, if you eat more than 150 grams of salami or whatever a week, you will die when you reach 45 and 3 months. Then people who have kept on eating salami until they are 45 and 2 months, then stopped. Problem solved. But science is just not like that. They can only tell you the probability of you dying at 45 and 3 months. And the fact is that some people will eat 300 grams of salami every day and live until they're 105. And of course humans, being humans, think they are one of the lucky ones, aided by the salami manufacturers with a $1 billion advertising budget. So they all think they will be the ones that live to 105. We are an incredibly optimistic creature. Bad things happen to other people, not them. Clearly, it's no good talking about weird things like p-values. We have to find a way of finding out if a particular person is going to die at 45 years and 3 months. We can't do that right now, but we can get pretty close with a good indication whether a diet is working for a particular person. It's a simple process of changing gut biology by eating the right sort of food for 3 weeks and seeing if the food cravings disappear. In this modern world of fake news and hyper advertising, what was needed was a really catchy phrase that would change the world. And that did not come from a clever advertising agency or a government department or a versatile scientist, but a guy who knew about food called Michael Pollan. Eat food, not too much, mostly plants. Actually, I prefer the more common version, eat real food. Now that is good advice, but there's still one problem. Real food costs more than synthetic chemical industrial foods. So how can we get real food at an affordable price on people's tables without chopping down the world's last forest and destroying our farmlands? Now that is a question I've been a bit OCD-ish about for many years, and is what I want to talk about in my next video. I'll show you my spinach beds and the art of tipping, which actually makes healthy food tasty, because I know full well that however healthy the food is, people won't eat it unless it tastes good.